is a What Up Wednesday. Having a lot of fun. Adam Schefter talked golf. He talked NBA, and he talked football. What other show are you going to hear Adam Schefter explore all of those topics, Harry?
None.
With alacrity, with intensity, and with amazing knowledge.
I think it's a lock. None.
None is correct. But now, ladies and gentlemen, we bring on a man who's not internationally known like Adam Schefter, but he's known to rock the analytic microphone on NBC Sportsnet here in Philadelphia, NBCSN, as we call it here, NBC Sports Philadelphia, covering baseball, breaking it down, and yes, he's ready for baseball. And he knows also, Corey Seidman knows, the Blue Jays, it's official now, do not have a friend in Pennsylvania, Corey. Governor Wolf, using his health secretary, telling the Blue Jays, no, you're not welcomed at PNC Park. Are you surprised by this?
Wow, that's a big step right there. You have to then wonder what is going to happen with the Blue Jays. Are they going to play all of their home games on the road? Does that mean the Phillies get an additional home series here like they did? What year was that? Like 2007 when there was the summit in Toronto? Might have been '08. The other option is this stadium they have in Buffalo, but it doesn't seem like it's up to code, the lights. And you know what, though? With everything else that's going crazy with baseball this year, is that really that big of a deal? I mean, if they can get something in place in the next couple of weeks here, potentially the Blue Jays could be playing games in Buffalo, by mid-August.
Yeah, but
it's
they don't
very
want
curious,
to.
though, because the Phillies' fourth series of the season was scheduled to be in Toronto.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that people are saying, the ballparks, the minor league parks are nice, but the lighting, if they're playing at night a lot, is not conducive for television because there aren't going to be any fans. So at least the TV part of it has to be good. And so I know they've been talking about Baltimore.
Yeah,
but
what
Ryan
about Baltimore?
Ryan Rothstein was saying that there may be a situation where they don't have any home games. Right, Ryan? What was the story you were saying, the report earlier?
Yeah, Corey, I don't know if you saw this, but I just read it on ESPN.com where they were saying all of Toronto's scheduled home games, they will just go to the opponent's park. So they essentially would be on the road for the entire 60-game season.
Well, it's less of a consideration, I guess, this year because there's going to be less of a home field advantage. So it's not like, they're going to be facing boos in every, opposing stadium. But, man, that's going to be rough on them. It's already going to be rough on them because they had such a tough schedule at the AL East and NL East. But from a Phillies perspective, it means 33 games at home, 27 on the road.
Exactly. And as long as they don't bring Joe Carter back into the city to bring back the bad memories of the 93 season, Harry. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. All too well. But I don't know, man. The cardboard cutouts behind home plate could be very intimidating at Citizens Bank Park, Corey.
They could.
I'm
starting to think, are people going to be submitting themselves, or are they going to be submitting, other people?
We're submitting our show.
What's the process going to be?
I just want the big. Yeah. We had a fan years ago when Harry and I were working here in Philly at 97.5. Had big heads made of us.
Big heads,
and they would they do it in wrestling, like the fat. But no, but these were personally homemade big heads, not fat heads. They were just the entire head. So instead of having a whole body of somebody in the stands, it would be just Tony's head and Harry's. But I got to give the Phillies credit, though, because the cardboard cutouts they're putting out there represent all the people who work in healthcare, nurses and doctors, and so they're giving them love so that their faces and their bodies will be on TV. I don't know how many games they're going to do it for, but they're already putting those up in the Citizens Bank Park seats as we speak.
Yeah, it was nice to see that because really those have been the true superstars of the last 4 months here. We haven't had athletes to look up to and watch on a daily basis, but certainly, all these medical personnel who were on the front lines all this time, as someone who was hit directly by it. I had my dad suffered from coronavirus for a few weeks, and it was I saw firsthand how important it is to be getting the right medical attention during this time. So that's a really nice thing that the Phillies are doing for this opening week of the season.
Well, Corey, I see a couple of analysts and prognosticators are kind of bullish on the Phillies, at least making the wild card in the National League. What is your take on how good this team could be in a shortened season?
Well, you figure that if you can get 35 wins, you're going to be in really good shape to make the playoffs. You can go 35 and 25. The Phillies are in a very tough spot. They have one of the toughest schedules in all of baseball because you're facing the AL East and NL East. So, for example, if you're an NL Central team like the Cubs, who may be in a similar spot as the Phillies overall, well, you're getting games against the Tigers and the Royals and the Pirates, whereas the Phillies are playing these games against the Yankees, Rays, Red Sox. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But, the Phillies are as well set up as any other non-Dodgers team in the National League. I don't look around this NL landscape and see a team other than the Dodgers that is clearly ahead of the Phillies. The Braves made some moves this offseason, but they've also been hit hard by coronavirus and by the fact that Cole Hamels has an arm injury, won't be ready for the season. They've had some players opt out. So I think the Phillies can get to that 33-win range, but I think it's going to take a couple more wins than that to solidly be in, the playoff, be in a playoff position over the final 2 weeks of the season.
Corey Seidman of NBC Sports Philly, and obviously the Yankees and the Dodgers are getting all kinds of love, and the big story involving the Dodgers is Mookie Betts. Lou Merlone, who does a sports show in the afternoon up in Boston, former player, was reporting, the first guy to report it, that the Mookie Betts situation with the Dodgers, he may be close to signing a long-term deal with L.A., and they're talking
13 years, $400 million.
Yeah, $350 to $400 million, 10-plus years. And as you know, that contract may be good for the Dodgers, bad for the Red Sox, but that puts the JT Realmuto situation to the front burner, because then he would, in essence, be the biggest name free agent at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, and the other, big ripple effect of this is that earlier in July, Matt Klentak, the Phillies general manager, said, the landscape has changed. Well, if Mookie Betts is getting $400 million, the landscape has not changed. That's the same contract that he would have gotten if it wasn't for baseball being shut down for 4 months and all these millions of dollars lost here. Yeah, JT Realmuto now instantly becomes the top free agent on a pretty weak market. It's like Realmuto, George Springer, a couple of pitchers, but he is clearly the best player, the best all-around player that will be available if he hits free agency. I was trying to think of the last time the Phillies entered a season with the player who was going to be the best player in that free agent class. Scott Rowland could have been, perhaps, if you make the case that he was better than Jim Thome in that class. But anyway, this is going to be, from a Phillies perspective, it's going to cost them more than they probably thought earlier in the month. I still think a deal is going to get done with JT Realmuto, though, because they have just laid too many pieces of this foundation to not bring this guy back. The fact that Bryce Harper is obsessed with him, he's called him his favorite player for years. How did it look to Bryce Harper if a year or two into Bryce Harper's contract, you let this guy who is in his prime and is the best at his position in all of baseball walk? I think the Phillies realize that, and eventually they're going to come to an agreement probably in that $130 million range over 5 years.
Yeah, you're right. Here's the thing. It's crazy because it is without a doubt, when you look at baseball, there's a lot of pitchers are important. There's no more important position on baseball teams than the catcher. And when you have a stud catcher, you see how hard it is for teams to find a catcher that's a franchise kind of guy. That's what makes this even more important for them not to let this guy get away. Because the fans here. First, luckily, they're not putting fans in the stands, or else it would be ugly all year if they don't get him signed.
Yeah, JT Realmuto is so far ahead of his, catching peers because he does it all. If you're Gary Sanchez in the Bronx, okay, the guy hits 35 homers and he's a big power bat, but he's not a good receiver. He's not a good framer. He's not a good base runner. He hits 40 points lower than JT Realmuto. So JT has that well-rounded skill set that any team would covet, particularly a team like the Dodgers, who I think are still going to be in the hunt for JT and could serve as the Phillies' biggest threat in re-signing him. The people who take the opposite viewpoint, like the skeptics of JT Realmuto, would say that the offensive package isn't good enough to warrant $130 million. But that's where you have to take into account the whole scope of him, what he gives you on the bases, what he gives you behind the plate, what he gives you carrying a pitching staff. That stuff is a little bit more difficult to measure. So some people don't buy that he's actually worth as much as the industry seems to think.
Corey Seidman, NBC Sports Philly. Follow him on Twitter at @CSeidman NBCS.
By the way, you are following me, right, Corey? I just wanted to make sure before we got too far ahead of ourselves here.
Of course, man. You're one of my favorite followers. You kidding me?
What about Harry Mays? You following him? I know he's a big golf guy. Do you have golf fantasy at all now? I want to ask, do you play daily fantasy golf on the weekends like Harry Mays, who's obsessed with it?
No, I don't. No. I don't.
He's too busy breaking down
right
baseball,
there.
man.
No, you know what? The new stat. Baseball has the most stats and most names for stats.
Yeah.
I came up with a new one this morning. The WKDNA. That's a new stat you're going to be seeing in the box
What
score.
does that stand for?
It's who knelt during the national anthem. That's now at the MLB website, a Twitter page at MLB.
Really?
Every day they're just posting. And listen, I don't care if you want to kneel, stand on your head, do whatever you do, cartwheels during the national anthem. I'm not one of those guys. If you want to kneel. But the fact that MLB, the actual verified Twitter account of baseball, is now deciding that every night during these summer camp games, is showing pictures of who's kneeling and who's not kneeling. What purpose does that serve? Seriously, again, I don't care what they're doing, but Major League Baseball, let's be honest, the African American portion of the baseball world isn't really up to what it used to be. A lot of young minority kids, blacks, whites, they're not playing baseball growing up. So maybe they're pandering to the minority community, but that's not going to have more kids go out there and play an expensive sport to play growing up unless they're in an organized league and getting more black people involved in Major League Baseball, is it?
Well, I mean, baseball, I think, is at like 8% black players, which is one of the lowest figures in the history of baseball. I mean, since baseball was integrated.
Exactly.
Which is very concerning for the game. I mean, that's something that Andrew McCutchen spoke about, about a month to 6 weeks ago. Andrew McCutchen's one of the guys who is, doing more than just saying words. Like, he's trying to put actions behind what he thinks. I know that Gabe Kapler, obviously made some headlines this week. He kneeled. He was the first manager to do so out in San Francisco. There's just more attention. Like, to your point, Tony, I think we are going to see on a daily basis during the season that tweeted out by the MLB account or stories on that, just because right now that is that's a big consideration in the country. It's a big topic that people are talking about. We're certainly in a different time than we were 3 or 4 years ago when the first player in Major League Baseball, Bruce Maxwell, took a knee.
Well, Corey, as a guy who's in and around the Phillies organization, and I know it's different this year than any other year that you've done this, but what will we notice as fans on the field as far as the difference between the Girardi Phillies and the Kapler Phillies?
I think you're already seeing it. I mean, like, Vince Velasquez is throwing a cutter now. Why did it take 3-4 years for that to happen? Little fixes like that. Tinkering with guys' approaches at the plate. Pitchers, already all the pitchers have been effusive about Joe Girardi and Brian Price, the new pitching coach. Last week, Jake Arrieta, JT Realmuto, they both kind of said the same thing, that where we want to go, this guy's already been. So that brings instant credibility. Like, we don't have to, it's not an act when he's up there saying, like, this is what's going to lead to wins and to a championship. He just, from top to bottom, like, he's running the organization more efficiently and smoothly than we've seen here probably since Charlie Manuel was the manager. The Phillies went through some really down years. In a shortened season, I'm interested to see how much of an impact Joe Girardi can make in the win-loss column. Baseball's not like the other sports where you're calling a play every single play, and the head coach or manager is so crucial to every win or loss. But I do think that Joe Girardi can make his presence felt. The fact that he knows how to manage with a DH, he knows how to use his bullpen. The bullpen is going to be the shakiest aspect of this Phillies team, so he better know how to use a bullpen.
And the other thing, of course, we've been watching these summer camp games, and we're seeing the social distancing and the players. But, the first base situation is still there because the guy still has to be held on. So the player at first base, I know some players are wearing masks at first base, but others aren't. And then you still have the umpire. So you have 3 people in a short distance there. Is that going to become an issue, or is that eventually going to slowly go away when there's no reported coronavirus outbreaks, because players are actually not socially distancing in some parts of the field?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of cases that come up throughout this season. I think it's going to be extremely unpredictable. I had a fantasy baseball draft 2 nights ago, and I don't even know how I feel about my team because some of these guys might not be playing in 3 weeks. It is going to be an issue with guys so close to each other, because say a catcher is asymptomatic and has COVID-19, and he's sitting right behind every hitter that comes up and right in front of that umpire. This is going to be a major challenge. It is promising that the percentage of people who have tested positive that MLB has tested is so low. I mean, that's promising. But, we have already seen that, like, when a guy does test positive, like a Scott Kingery or a Freddie Freeman, it's about 4 weeks before the guy's able to, like, get back on the field and start taking some swings.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's the thing in a shortened season. Like, you lose a pitcher for 10 days on the disabled list, that's 1/6 of the season. Mm-hmm. And if he's your stud and he's your number one starter, you're really screwed.
Yeah, and that's also true of guys who have pregnant wives. Like, Mike Trout's wife is due at some point in August. Does that mean he misses 2 weeks? Zach Wheeler's wife is due any day now, really this weekend. Does that mean he misses 2 starts? And to your point, 2 starts for a pitcher when you're making 12 starts, in a normal year, that's like 8 starts or something, So every game carries such critical importance. You've heard people say it to death that you need to get out to a hot start this year. The Phillies have not, I don't know if there's anything to this, but Phillies have had some exhibition games this week. They haven't really hit. You're hoping that that's just like guys kind of working out the rust. But hopefully this team's ready to go on Friday night against the Marlins. Couldn't ask for an easier team to start against.
Yeah, except they can't beat the Marlins.
Right,
Right. Hey, Corey,
True.
good stuff, man. Always great to pick your brain about baseball and enjoy your stuff on Twitter and, of course, on NBC Philly. Harry has one more question.
One real quick. A lot of people are high on the Reds. Are you one that thinks the Reds could make some noise in the Central?
I actually wrote about the Reds a few weeks ago as a sleeper team, but then in the time since then, everybody's called them a sleeper team, which brings up the point, like, can you really be a sleeper if everybody's calling you a sleeper? I don't know.
Well,
I think they could be pretty good. They have a deep rotation.
by the way, how do you have a fantasy draft in a pandemic season? Come on, man. I know you have to do it, but that's why I tell you.
another
That's why
one
I don't
tonight,
play how do you do a fantasy league when one guy goes down, your entire team is shot? Come on, man.
Hey, man, we're all in the same position.
That's right.
Gotta hope luck is on
That's
my
why I
side.
don't do fantasy except fantasy golf, because I'm hot on that now. And I only have to spend $3. I'll throw $3.
That's because Adam Schefter told you about
Exactly.
it.
I didn't know. You never told me how much it cost to play
No,
fantasy.
you never seemed interested. You're always pee on fantasy.
Couch guy never told me how much. He makes it sound like he's winning thousands of dollars
I know.
every week.
Yeah,
Let's get it together here, Harry.
Yeah.
All right, let's get it together.
All right, Corey. Appreciate your time,
Thanks,
man.
Corey.
Brother. Thank you so
See you
much.
guys.
There he is, Corey Seidman. Let's give him a roaring round of applause.
At C Seidman, NBCS on Twitter. He's a good follow.
He is. He's solid.
Yeah.